Queens, New York, gospel radio station WWRL, and morning show DJ, the Reverend Del Shields.
9:40 a.m. on this beautiful Grace Tuesday, and I don't know if you've gotten out yet to get your daily newspaper, but in both of the early morning papers, the headline from one says, "The Kitty Corps Crack Bust," and the second headline says, "Boy 10 busted for selling crack. Pal 14 also seized."
Del Shields speaks to a greater New York community in which drugs, and especially crack, may now be the leading industry and the leading provider of high-paying jobs. Even for entry-level positions, such as lookouts at a crack house, starting pay is $100 to $200 a day. In this community, the drug trade touches everyone.
We want to hear from you. Have you in any way been affected by this?
When Reverend Shields opened the phone lines, all 10 light up. As gospel plays in the background, the first caller, a teenager, tells of his years in the drug trade.
How old were you at the time?
I started selling drugs when I was 10.
You were, oh my God, you were 10?
Yes.
So you can you relate to this kid who was busted today?
Yes.
How much money did you make at 10 a week?
A week, when I was younger, on the average for like when I first started selling, about $500 a week.
Did your income increase?
Yes, it did.
To what?
Like $2,000 to $3,000 a week.
Overall, this young man's income averaged $1,600 a week, until he was arrested. He says a 10-month prison term has chastened him.
You made $1,600, you don't have any money now, and you're not tempted to go back?
I'm tempted, but it's like I don't want to go back to jail.
The temptation, however, seems hard to resist. You could spend years in school and never come close to making this kind of money. I asked a different caller, also an ex-drug dealer, about the industry's upside.
It pays well, there's a reasonable amount of security, you work with a number of different people. Is it a good job in that sense?
Well, it's good if you figure, like, I remember one time I told my father when Al Capone first came on, I said, Daddy, why do you work hard and you don't have what this man has? You know what he did to me? He gave me the hit of my life. But I didn't see it until I got older, what he meant.
What his father meant by the spanking was that Al Capone and company were criminals. But back during Prohibition, they ran the violent drug trade of their era, the bootlegging of alcohol. The profits were huge, and for many at the economic bottom, bootlegging provided a ticket to the top. Today, of course, the media have been mapping the growth industry of this era, cocaine. To illustrate how the industry's evolved, we're going to use the tools of the trade, a dollar bill and a mirror. This is one way of depicting the economies of the past, as a triangle, with most people in poverty near the bottom and fewer as you move toward prosperity and the top. Now, America introduced economic equality, a diamond-shaped economy, with most jobs in the broad working middle class and fewer above and below. But as we've lost good working class jobs in the middle, America has turned economic progress on its head, and we're moving toward an hourglass economy. There are more good jobs above, more bad jobs below, and it's becoming an increasingly tight squeeze moving from the bottom to the top. In the past, manufacturing jobs used to fill out the economic middle, but they've been replaced by highly educated jobs above, dead-end jobs below, and those who make it have less and less in common with those who don't.
Dr. King talked about that. He said that America is rapidly facing a situation to be the haves and the have-nots, and that's what we're faced with today. The average black successful man or woman really does not relate to the kids behind.
Economist Barry Bluestone is an expert on the polarization of the economy.
There's more and more evidence that young people in America without a high school degree can't make it in America. The average high school dropout today makes 25% less than the average high school dropout 15 years ago. You simply can't make a decent living at Wendy's or McDonald's or Kmart, and that's why many kids are turning to the drug trade.
Today, fewer and fewer kids see any future in starting at the bottom of the job ladder.
Yes, it is true. I have a free training program. Can I tell you how many jobs I have and cannot fill? Because why? The young people say, oh, I don't want that particular job.
The drug industry, of course, pays far better than being a janitor or porter.
We had many young people who told us they would not push a broom for $20,000.
All right, for those who are selling,
yes,
should they give up this rather lucrative position to take a job as a porter?
Reverend Shields, as I said to young men, if you have made $40,000 in a year, but you get busted and go to jail for 5 years, that amounts to less than a minimum wage.
Not necessarily. That kid who called earlier said he was making $1,600 a week at age 15. That's tax-free, the taxable equivalent of more than $100,000 a year. It makes the wages of sin look pretty good, despite the plea with which Reverend Shields concludes his show.
Actually, it's a composite story of a mother and a mother's agony with her son who is on drugs. Here she is, Dorothy Norwood. Leave it in the hands of the Lord.
He's pawned all of my jewelry, my TV and my stereo too.
Not far from WWRL's studios, the officially unemployed are in evidence.
Lord, what in the world am I going to do?
But many of them are very gainfully employed in the drug trade. Almost every block bears evidence of the industry. The police walk right past a typical hole through which crack is anonymously bought and sold. Job counselor Norman Damon has worked these Brooklyn streets for years. A Vietnam veteran, he's devoted his life to defeating the drug traders. So far, they've proved as intractable as the Viet Cong, and equally dangerous, as he witnessed recently.
A young fellow had an altercation with an older gentleman, and the teenager's family were huddled around him, trying to protect him, and pleading with this fellow with a 9mm, please don't shoot my son. Please don't shoot my son. Mister, I'll get the money for you.
Damon's story is shocking, but not unusual. This is coming to be a standard business transaction in the industry. As in Al Capone's day, a totally free market can quickly degenerate.
And he came out and he had the gun out and he said, "Move, old man. I'm telling you to move, old man." And he shot the kid. And he told him, he said, "You think it's a joke out here? It is not a joke out here. I'm not playing with you. It is not a joke." And he shot the kid. Killed him.
The institutions of the ghetto offer little competition to the drug trade. Near a school, we interviewed a group of kids.
How many of you go to school?
I go to school.
Oh, Pop, what's that? You go to school?
Yeah.
The kid in the back goes to school, figuratively speaking. Or, as his friends put it, he attends crack school, majoring in pipology and stealing cars.
Where'd you say you went to school?
Pipology, crack school. Smoking that shit. Pipology. They on the pipe ball team. Nah, and they go to school for ripping off cars. They know how to steal cars.
Stealing is an important part of the ghetto economy, since it provides the outside capital to support a major consumer industry like drugs.
How good is the money dealing drugs?
Well, an individual can take $200, okay, and make $600 in a matter of 4 hours.
Is it mostly the smarter kids who get involved in this?
Yes, it is. Mostly the smarter kids.
In other words, it's the most enterprising kids in the ghetto who stand to gain the most from the drug trade. As a result, both the ghetto and society are deprived of their talents. Society does, of course, provide institutions to discourage drug trafficking.
Open one.
We came to East Jersey State Prison, where a group of men serving life sentences has become famous for trying to convince kids in trouble that ultimately crime doesn't pay.
See, you don't be thinking about the consequences that you're going to suffer if you get caught. See, because you can't get away forever.
For almost 15 years, Malik Wilkes has been telling the same story. We asked him to tell it to us.
When they slam the door on you, when you're sitting in your cell lonely, when you can't call your mother, when you can't go outside and get in your car and go for a ride, you're going to realize and everything that you was on the wrong route.
It sounds pretty convincing, but the rhetoric may mask the reality of making a living in an hourglass economy. Harvey George, head of the Lifers Group, tells of a prostitute who disapproved of her son's job as a crack house lookout until she saw the money being made.
She said she didn't see no reason to be begging and trying to ask a man to come in and spend the night with her so she could pay her rent when her son could stand out there in front of building and watch for the crack dealer, watch for him, mind you, and bring $200-300. She said she went out there and helped him.
So you understand why they're doing it?
Yeah, because she felt like, she found a measure of self-respect. She didn't need a man to come lay there with her in front of her kids.
So, but why couldn't she have gotten a job doing housework or something like that?
Not making that kind of money.
Raymond Hawkins is a man of numerous distinctions in prison. But back in the Brooklyn neighborhood we visited earlier, Hawkins was known as a drug dealer, beginning in 8th grade.
Why did you think at 13 that you had to make a lot of money?
If you look in America, it's about designer this, it's about designer that. It's not about the station wagon anymore, it's about the Jaguar, it's about the BMW.
The dreams of the economy's top half have become models for us all. And if we measure ourselves by such standards, no one ever has enough. That's the message of the Ivan Boskis and Mike Milkins atop the economy. It makes a mockery of incomes near the bottom.
After working 40 hours and looking at the paycheck after they take out the money in comparison to a guy that was on the corner, and he was saying, wow, you only got $100 and some and you've been working 40 hours. I've been out here for about 15, 20 minutes and I got that.
And even money doesn't tell the whole story.
You got to use your brain to be a drug dealer. You got to outfox this guy. It's like it's the chaser and the chasee. How many times can I outfox this guy before he finally conquers me?
So it's interesting.
In a sense, yes, it is.
Exciting.
Definitely exciting. Yeah.
Well paying.
Without a doubt.
We're back in Brooklyn. Tim and Andre are two of Norman Damon's success stories. They both hold jobs in a hospital.
What percentage of the kids you used to know and go to school with are in the drug industry?
Majority of them. About 90% of my peers is pushing drugs now. Right.
Tim and Andre are the hope for the future. But they work in the hospital boiler room and earn $24 a day, while peers make as much as $500.
Have any of your friends ragged you about, put you down?
Mm-hmm. They did, yeah. Said, well, you working in the hospital, and I make this much a week, and you make that much. But hey, when they get in trouble and get locked up or whatever, I'll be still out here making what I got to do, making an okay living.
I don't see how they survive if they're supporting themselves. Because of $24 a day, you could barely buy yourself something to eat during the course of a week, okay? Before I got arrested, I had a job making, I think, $4.75 an hour, and I had my wife and 2 kids to take care of. By the time I came home and paid rent and bought food, I couldn't even buy me a pair of shoes. So I know they had to be going through hell making $24 a day.
Everyone agrees that job opportunities exist, but the pay is modest, the initiative enormous.
There's a lot of opportunities out here for a lot of us young ones, but you just got to put yourself towards. You got to be in it to win it. Because if you don't set your own goal, put yourself to it, then it's not gonna come to you. You have to go to it.
Minority kids represent the fastest growing segment of America's youth population. This is our future workforce.
What are you gonna do when you grow up, do you figure? What job?
I'm gonna be a carpenter.
A carpenter?
A computer operator.
A computer operator?
A fireman.
What do you want to do when you grow up?
Be a bus driver, like my father.
When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Man, football player, boxer. Those are the things I wanted to be.
A teacher.
I think I wanted to be a lawyer, doctor. I always liked to care for people. I'm a people person.
It's actually touching. Yet these men wound up dealing drugs and death, literally. Several are in for murder.
I saw somebody get shot right over there for drugs.
Right there on the corner.
The kids see the occupational risks in the drug trade, but in fact, for most people in the drug trade, the risks aren't that great. In an hourglass society like ours, with a great number of rich and a great number of poor, you see people getting away with murder at both ends.
For individual kids, dealing may be a rational economic choice. For American society, however, it represents a devastating loss, because all of us play on the same economic team. The drug profession penalizes the team in obvious ways: stolen property, taxes for police and prisons. But worse, perhaps, and again speaking strictly in economic terms, If American labor works the streets instead of the factories, unemployment may be lower than we think, but who is going to manufacture the future wealth of this society? How much will it cost you and me to carry the rest of the team? It's not just the personal tragedy of Raymond Hawkins, or the fact that we pay $21,000 a year to keep him in prison. It's that, in or out, he doesn't contribute a thing to our imperiled prosperity.
We turn now to our regular Wednesday series of conversations with people who have solutions to the drug problem. Tonight, we talk with Washington, D.C. Superior Court Judge Reginald Walton, who has just been nominated to serve as one of 3 deputies to Drug Control Director William Bennett. Judge Walton is a 40-year-old son of a Pennsylvania Steeltown family who as a teenager was himself arrested a couple of times for unruly behavior. But Walton has now earned a reputation as a tough, no-nonsense jurist who imposes hard-nosed sentences. I spoke with him recently about how drugs are affecting the courts.
Lost credibility because I've heard police officers indicate to me in reference to individuals that they have arrested. I've heard marshals who transport the inmates from the jail to the courtroom who will tell you that the inmates themselves will say that they know that there's not going to be significant punishment involved. And as a result of that, the system just does not pose a threat as far as their criminal behavior is concerned.
What can you do about that?
Well, obviously you can't put judges off the bench because they don't particularly espouse the view that one may have that people, when they commit crime, should be adequately punished. But at the same time, I do think that we need to get more judges on the bench who are about meting out punishment that fits the crime.
What about the death penalty for drug dealers?
It depends. I mean, obviously the first time out, you're going to be more lenient than the second time. But ultimately, I think there becomes a point when someone sells drugs so many times that we have to make an assessment that as long as they remain in society, they are going to continue to engage in that conduct. And since their conduct is having such a devastating effect on society, I think that we reach a point where we have to say that they will be incarcerated for the rest of their life.
And under what circumstances do you think the death penalty is justified?
Well, I think that if someone is profiting from the sale of human suffering, and as a result of their engaging in activity of the drug trade, they cause someone's life to be taken, I think that serious consideration should be given as to whether or not the death penalty is appropriate. I can say that the most positive aspect about the death penalty is the fact that if we ever expect to be able to get to those at the top of the drug world, we're going to have it in place, because a lot of individuals involved in the drug trade will tell you that if I talk, the consequences of my talking as far as those involved in the drug trade is concerned is death. But
they will kill him.
Yes. And they realize that, and therefore they have a disincentive to talk. However, if you also have the potential sanction of death, then you can say back to them, well, the same thing can happen if you don't. And I think that it does provide the prosecutor a significant bargaining chip if you're going to be able to get to those at the top of the drug world.
Some of the people in the streets say that people who come into the courts these days just aren't afraid of the courts. They aren't afraid of the courts, they aren't afraid of jails, they aren't afraid of prison.
I think a lot of people feel that the system can be manipulated through the plea process and other means of manipulation.
What do you think has to be done to restore the credibility of the system, to make it more effective?
We cannot arrest our way out of this epidemic. However, how are we ever going to be able to provide an environment for those young kids, the next generation, to grow up in a situation where they're not going to be involved in criminal activity unless we're able to rid the community of the criminal element that's providing the negative role model image for those young kids?
How can you do that if a drug dealer can come in and plea bargain his way out of time?
Well, you need more prosecutors, you need more judges, you need more jail cells. a lot of plea bargaining results from the fact that the prosecutor's office cannot handle the number of cases that they have. If you had more prosecutors, if you had more jail cells, if you had more judges, then there'd be a disincentive by the prosecutor to offer that type of plea, and therefore when that individual was convicted, there would be certainty of punishment, which does not happen now. I don't think that in all cases it's necessary to lock someone up and throw away the key, because I think that the system can have credibility even if you don't lock a significant number of people up, if people understand that there is punishment. And punishment doesn't always necessarily mean jail. It may mean community service. It may mean forcing people who commit crimes and take from society to go out to places like Atomic Gardens and work for free and clean up those apartment complexes.
Tell us about Potomac. You mean meaning?
Atomic Gardens is a apartment complex in the city that's not too far from the Capitol, which has approximately 277 units, and it's basically being overrun by drugs. And it's also a significant problem in that the conditions of the property are horrendous. And the upkeep is poor, the maintenance is poor, and there's a need for those facilities to be improved if we're going to hopefully improve the quality of life for those people who are forced to live in that type of environment. And it seems to me that we need to use the manpower of those individuals who commit crimes in order to fix those facilities. If we don't have the money to pay employees to do it, then why not force individuals who commit crime to give something back to society by forcing them to work? I don't see anything wrong with that, and I think it would cause them to have a greater appreciation that there are consequences for your acts, which don't necessarily mean consequences of incarceration. I think it would be wise to take them and make them report to a job site early in the morning and make them work until sundown. That way, they may be too tired to go out after dark and sell their drugs. Plus, they're giving something back to society. They're being forced to improve the environments that are being affected by the conduct that they engage in.
And you think that kind of thing can make a difference?
Oh, I think it can. We need to reinstill the work ethic. A lot of young men who come into the court system have never worked, and they've never seen anybody in their home environment ever work. And I think that the work ethic is important. And I see nothing wrong with forcing people who have taken from society to give back.
Is there a profile of the typical drug offender?
Yes, unfortunately, most of them are young black men. Most of them have come from an environment where there was never a father who played a role in their life. Most of the mothers, when you look at the pre-sentence reports, were teenagers when they brought that child into the world. In all probability, there is no real extended family there for her to fall back on. And in all probability, in most situations, there has not been a history of anyone working in the family where that child came from.
You have a reputation of being a tough judge, not having a lot of sympathy for people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Why is that?
Well, I came from a disadvantaged background to the extent that my parents did not have a lot of money. However, I did have an advantage of having good parents, and that makes a big difference. Because even though there wasn't a lot of money in the home, there was a lot of love in the home, and that makes a big difference. However, I have seen a number of people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds who have been successful. And I don't think that poverty necessarily equates with someone having criminal propensity. Now, admittedly, a lot of people are growing up in environments where obviously the environment has a significant impact on whether or not they involve themselves in criminal offenses. However, you have to look at the victims of the crimes that these individuals are perpetrating. And by and large, you're going to find that it's going to be poor and disadvantaged people who they are perpetrating their criminal offenses against. And when it comes down to my decision as to whether or not I'm going to favor the side of the defendant who committed the offense, or whether I'm going to favor the side of that poor victim who was the victim of that offense, I fall on the side of the victim. So if I deem it appropriate, I think I have to give a sentence that should adequately reflect the outrage of the community for what the person did. I think that in the cases that I've handled, especially when I was in the juvenile assignment, that I had a pretty good response from the individuals who came into court before me, because they knew I was a no-nonsense judge. They knew that if they played the rules as I required, that things were going to be all right. At the same time, they knew that if they did not abide by what I said, that there were going to be consequences, and I think that that's the way the system should work.
I know that you speak a lot to young people. What do you tell them when you go out to talk with them?
I talk to them about history. I talk to them about the fact that we were forced to come to this country and be slaves. I tell them that by selling drugs, they are nothing but a slave master because they keep their own people down. I tell them that if you use drugs, you basically become nothing but a slave, not to a person, but to a chemical substance. I talk to them about my background and the fact that I did not grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth, the fact that I was able to overcome educational deficiencies, the fact that I drive as nice a car as any of the drug dealers, the fact that I live in a decent home, the fact that I don't have to look over my shoulder worrying about somebody killing me because they're trying to take from me what they want. And I try to provide a role model for them that they can follow and that they can say, well, if Reggie Walton can do it, then I can do it.
The first time we talked, you were very, I remember you being, in spite of all of the negative things about this, you were optimistic that something really could be done. Why?
I feel that way because when you go out into some of the most depressed areas of this city, you find people who are positive thinking. You find people who are doing very constructive things. You find young people who are an inspiration. And you say to yourself that if these young people who are growing up in this environment can have that perspective on life, then we have to keep hope alive, because we have to keep producing young people like that, who are out there, who are positive, who want to go to college, who want to get a job, who don't involve themselves in criminal activity. Because if you look at the statistics, you'll find that it's only a small number of people who are making life miserable for everyone else. So if 90% of the people in a community can be law-abiding citizens, then why should we succumb to feeling that we cannot overcome this problem merely because 10% of the people won't condone their conduct to what the law says they have to do? And I think that in order to keep this society alive, we have to be positive thinking. And therefore, I believe that there is hope. And I'm certain that someday we will look back on this experience and we'll all say that while it was tough to overcome, that we did overcome it.